Welcome back to the Emily Show. Leonard, we have a lot to talk about this week. We have a whole bunch of updates on the civil docket and the criminal docket. The judge responded to what we were talking about with Lively, Baldoni, Wayfarer, et everybody, and Lively's request for more briefing. So we have a very brief update on that. We have updates on what you might have missed on stream last week, just to keep you all in the loop real quick. We have some Nancy Guthrie updates. Even though it has now been over 3 months, over 100 days, there are some updates that are coming out in the spotty, piecemeal way that Sheriff Nanos seems to be operating. That thrills me so much. And a few scheduling updates in the David case. We have a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker, yes, also a lawyer, and this is The Emily Show. I break down the pop culture, entertainment, and high-profile cases that we're all talking about. I know you want the facts, so let's get into it. If you missed stream this week, don't worry. I've got you covered with some very quick updates on the criminal docket from Alec Murdaugh, Kouri Richins, and just a reminder on Brendan Banfield, because I saw a ton of questions about, wait, when is he getting sentenced? June 5th. Brendan Banfield will be in court June 5th to get sentenced, and we're also going to see arguments on the motion for new trial that day. And yes, in Kouri Richins, we also heard that a motion for new trial is going to be made, and the court set dates for that, even though she was sentenced last week to life without the possibility of parole. She will be transported to prison within this week sometime is what's expected, but she will also be back in court, probably via video call, not actually physically in court, on June 5th for updates on that pending financial crimes case, which now that she's been sentenced to life without parole, we'll see what happens with it, because restitution is a part of that, but also with everything that has happened in the murder case, what are they going to sentence her to? There is no more to be sentenced to. So I'm interested to see where we go with that. But remember, her attorneys for the aggravated murder case are not going to be the same lawyers on her financial crimes case. So we're going to have to see what happens with when she gets new counsel on that case and then how it goes forward. Plus, she still doesn't have new lawyers in all of those civil cases. Remember, they bounced out of the case the day after her conviction. It was just full peace out. So we still have all of these cases where she needs to have new counsel by the end of May. So tick-tock, I'm keeping an eye on if anybody makes a new appearance, or if Kouri Richins is really going to go full Sarah Boone and be representing herself. I'm not quite sure, but we did hear during sentencing that she has received her paralegal certificate. I don't think that's going to be sufficient for the complex nature of the cases against her. Then again, some of that complex nature after her conviction for murder is going to be gone because she's seeking assets from the estate of her murder victim. And well, that changes quite a bit after a conviction. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens in a few of the pending cases for Kouri Richins. And then, of course, the defense said they're going to file a motion for new trial, but they were waiting for a hearing to see if they got funding for an expert to file that motion for new trial. So we'll see what happens with that. And then, of course, they will be filing notice of appeal. That is going to happen. We'll see those grounds for appeal down the road, and I will be covering those too. You've asked for a lot more Richins coverage. So Lawnards, get the Lawnard app, stay tuned. We have more Richins to come because there are some things in trial that we haven't covered just yet, and you've been asking for them. Plus, you saw on stream, and you've probably seen the headlines, that Alec Murdaugh's murder conviction has been overturned because of everything that went on with the former clerk of court, Courthouse Becky. Yep, Courthouse Becky caused the entire trial to get overturned, which means we are now waiting for when the next date in court is for Alec Murdaugh. We heard from AG Alan Wilson, and we heard from lead prosecutor Creighton Waters that they are exploring all options, but they intend to re-prosecute this case, and they intend to ask for a speedy trial, meaning they are hoping to go to trial, Attorney General Alan Wilson said, before the end of 2026. Are we going to be spending Murdaugh Part 2 this winter? I don't know if they're going to get to trial before the end of 2026, but that's their optimistic goal. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. And if you're like, Emily, who's paying the defense attorneys? Don't worry. I covered it on stream because Dick and Jim did give some comments about that. There's a lot of Murdaugh happening. And when we have a next court date, I will let you know in the Lawnard app first. And a quick update on Blake Lively's outstanding motion that had been filed back in September, and they are still waiting for court resolution on. Remember, Blake Lively had asked for some additional briefing, and I was critical of that request because the briefing seemed complete, and everything that happened subsequent to the briefing doesn't really go to the issue that she was asking for. And the court, through memo filing, put one sentence up that said no additional briefing is needed at this time, period. So the court has all the briefing needed. The briefing is complete, and we're just waiting for a ruling on the court. And then that case will be done, but not all the way done, because it seems that there aren't NDAs. So I imagine we will still hear more about this case, even when it is complete in court, which hopefully is somewhat soon. I'm very interested in the legal arguments there about whether Lively qualifies under that California code section for attorney's fees here, and if the court is going to apply that code section or if that needed to be filed in California, not in New York. I'm curious about the legal nuances of how that's all going to play out. So I'm going to keep an eye on that one. It's really the last thing that needs to wrap up. And I'm sure we will continue to see more from this, but that is for a different day, because today we have updates in the David case and then a bunch of updates. Well, a bunch of statements from the sheriff in the Nancy Guthrie case. Let's just call it what it is. Is it updates? I mean, every time the sheriff says something, I guess it is an update because there seems to be no communication plan, but we need to talk about David first. Singer David, stage name David spelled with a 4, was back in court last week for a pre-preliminary hearing conference to see what was going on with the case. And remember, when we talked about the arraignment, the defense had been banging the table that it was time for this case to go to preliminary hearing. A preliminary hearing is that first initial hearing of probable cause. Is the person in custody likely the person that did the thing they're charged with? In this case, special circumstances murder with multiple special circumstances, including for financial pecuniary gain, in addition to other crimes. So they have to have that preliminary hearing. Some jurisdictions we've seen do that by indictment with a grand jury, but the attorneys were asking for a speedy preliminary hearing, and the DA said, yeah, you want a speedy preliminary hearing? Let's go. And filed that preliminary hearing memo that we went over together that had so much more information about the case and what the prosecution expected to present at that preliminary hearing. Remember, not a trial, not even really a mini trial, though sometimes it can feel like it, a probable cause hearing. Well, they were back in court May 12th, and the preliminary hearing that was supposed to happen May 29th has been pushed to the end of June. But media in the courtroom for LA Magazine, I think, did a really good job breaking down what happened in court on May 12th. And we're going to take a look at that real quick because the tussling between the attorneys seems like it's not going away anytime soon. The headline from LA Magazine reported May 12th, 2026 is David winks at Blair Burke, his lawyer, as judge pushes murder preliminary hearing to June 29th. That, by the way, is at the request of the defendant because the defendant has to waive their right for speedy preliminary hearing, and that was done in court on May 12th. LA Magazine says that during a hearing on Tuesday morning at the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center in downtown Los Angeles, you will often hear me referring to that as CCB because it used to be the Criminal Courts Bill. You will hear me referring to it as CCB. Judge Almeida granted a continuance, pushing the preliminary hearing to June 29th with an additional status hearing now scheduled for June 17th. And just a note on that, as I was looking at the docket in this case, those are scheduled inverse. The prelim on the docket says June 17th and a pre-trial conference on June 29th. I don't think that's correct. I think it is a status hearing on June 17th, but that is the way that it is trailing on the docket. So if you see that, just know that the preliminary hearing is not going to start till the end of June. They report that David, who I will try to refer to by first name, because if you're not reading this, the way I say Burke and Burke is confusing with David Burke and attorney Blair Burke. So I'm going to try to refer to him by first name. He appeared relaxed throughout much of the hearing, at times leaning forward casually with his elbows resting on the armrest of the chair. After the hearing concluded, David appeared to wink at his lawyer, Blair Burke, while being escorted from the courtroom. They go on to say that the hearing Tuesday largely centered on the enormous amount of digital discovery still being exchanged between prosecutors and David's legal team, led by high-profile defense attorney Blair Burke. Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman told the court that prosecutors have already turned over more than 10 terabytes of discovery material, including, and this is what I was very interested in, including iCloud data, That will be fortuitous, I'm sure. Forensic evidence, lab reports, LAPD reports, photographs, arrest reports, and extensive video evidence. Silverman said prosecutors are continuing to upload evidence through the evidence.com platform and noted that overall discovery could exceed 40 terabytes. I suspect with the amount of video and then data from the Tesla, there will be quite a lot of video, which is just going to eat up storage. Quote, discovery will take a few months to complete because there is so much, Silverman told the court, adding that the uploading process itself has been ongoing since last week due to the size of the files. Silverman also expressed frustration over repeated scheduling adjustments, noting that prosecutors had already contacted witnesses and altered schedules based on prior hearing dates. Remember, the defense was in front of the cameras at the arraignment saying, this case needs to be in public and we need to go right now to our preliminary hearing. And the prosecutor said, bet, let's go to preliminary hearing. And now this is the second time it's getting kicked out. However, I understand where the defense is coming from. They're like, well, if we don't have all the information, we can't go to prelim. However, that was known 2 hearing dates ago. DGA Silverman said, quote, we want to make sure that we're not doing this over and over. It holds us hostage. Defense attorney Burke acknowledged that the defense still lacks certain narrative reports and written summaries outlining the prosecution's theory of the case. I mean, they put it all in that filing, though. Defense counsel said, quote, it's hard to argue what you don't know yet, adding that while there are still discovery concerns, including outstanding DNA evidence, she believes many of the issues can likely be resolved informally without court intervention at this time. Judge Olmedo said the court would continue evaluating scheduling requests carefully moving forward. You better be able to explain to me why. However, if the defense doesn't have all the discovery, it's a pretty good indication that they might not be ready for preliminary hearing yet. But at a probable cause hearing, it is not likely that the case is going to get kicked out at that point. So if the prosecution can narrow down what they're going to be relying on at prelim, which I think they did pretty thoroughly in their memo, it makes it a little bit easier for the defense to target on the evidence that they are focused on. But the court can't really tell the defense how to do their job in a special circumstance murder case. The court went on to say that she could not guarantee additional continuances would not occur if discovery disputes persist. The preliminary hearing is expected to begin June 29th and could last 5 to 6 days, according to the estimates discussed in court. And that is probably for the DA's presentation of evidence. That does not surprise me. DDA Silverman is an incredibly thorough attorney, and I would not be surprised if it was a 5 or 6 day preliminary hearing that would include quite a lot of the evidence and probably some technical evidence, including DNA, video, cell phone tracking, and more digital evidence. So we won't really know until that next hearing date on June 17th if this goes forward at the end of June as anticipated, or if it gets kicked out further. And unless something really unexpected happens, I don't think we will hear much about this case until that next court hearing date. And going from what we do know to what we just don't know enough about, we need to talk about the Nancy Guthrie case. Leonard, you've heard me talking so much about how busy things have gotten this time of year, and I am going to take a minute to thank one of our sponsors that has made that much easier, and that's Hungryroot. Why? Because all of the executive functioning is going in other directions this month, and Hungryroot makes it so easy to get exactly what I need delivered to my door, whether it is meals, lunches, breakfasts, dinners, groceries, sweet treats, snacky snacks. They've got you covered, from protein to produce, and my favorite, crunchy, sour gummy rings. They're so good. And as you go, they learn the things that you like so they can suggest other things. They have over 50,000 recipes, over 1,000 grocery items, and high quality ingredients, including organic proteins and non-GMO produce. So if you need to make shopping easier right now, or you need to make meals easier, or both, get it delivered right to your door with Hungryroot. Leonard, I know you're going to love Hungryroot as much as I do. And for a limited time, get 40% off your first order, plus get a free item in every order for life. Go to hungryroot.com/Leonard and use code Leonard. That's hungryroot.com/Leonard, code Leonard for 40% off your first box, plus a free item in every box for life of your choice. Now, let's get back to today's show. There are a couple of things going on in the Nancy Guthrie case and surrounding the Nancy Guthrie case. First, we've talked a couple of times about the investigation into the sheriff of Pima County, Sheriff Nanos, and that the Pima County Board of Supervisors had a lot of questions and wasn't really sure what their options were with regard to Sheriff Nanos, and what they were saying were indications that he was not exactly truthful in his past job applications into Pima County, and concerns that during depositions he had not been truthful. Well, we now know that the council decided not to upend the election on that, but rather forwarded this to the state's attorney general for further investigation. The thing I would never want to hear if I am Nancy Guthrie's family is that the sheriff in charge of this investigation, whose office is in charge of this investigation, is going to be distracted by something like an investigation into the sheriff and potential perjury. I am taking a look at reporting from AZ Central. This is from May 14th. The Pima County Supervisors voted to refer Sheriff Chris Nanos to the state attorney general for possible perjury and urged him to repair trust after months of controversy. The article says, though the supervisors referred Nanos' action to the attorney general for review, they did not take a position on whether Nanos committed a crime. It's not really their place to do so. They say that the sheriff is under scrutiny over issues unrelated to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, who has been missing since February 1st. Nanos, they summarize, is under fire for misrepresenting his work history in a sworn deposition, on his public resume, in media interviews, and in a report to the county leaders. They say that the vote was a blow to the embattled sheriff, but a bipartisan pair of county supervisors had wanted to go even further. Before the meeting, Democratic Supervisor Matt Hines and Republican Supervisor Steve Christie had floated a plan to force Nanos out of his job. After receiving advice from their lawyers, the supervisors steered clear of vacating the sheriff's office. They might not actually have the authority to upend an election. They go on to say that Supervisor Rex Scott said that the majority of the board agreed that the supervisors do not have the authority to remove Nanos from office. Right, Emily, keep reading. Quote, he met his obligation under the statute, but I think it's important that we make the referral to the Attorney General's office, and we did. And what is most important is that the sheriff take immediate action to repair the extraordinary climate of distrust and lack of faith in his leadership. I absolutely agree with the statements of Representative Scott there, because there is a tremendous climate of distrust, and I can't imagine how that feels within Pima County. They go on to say that Nanos has remained defiant despite scrutiny from the county board, a vote of no confidence from his own deputies, and a long-shot Republican-led recall effort to knock him out of office before he is up for re-election in 2028. And then they quote Nanos's attorney, James Cool, in an email to them saying, quote, the sheriff is grateful for this opportunity to report to the board on his department's many successes. The sheriff heard the words of the supervisors tonight, and he looks forward to continuing his work to promote trust and public confidence in the sheriff's department. Is that by giving statements to people.com instead of just having a press conference? Is it the continued piecemeal discussions that just kind of halvesies what's going on, or no? Is that not part of it? They go on to say that the sheriff had hoped to put questions about his past to rest when he provided a report to the board in April, but it sparked even more controversy. They say that members of the Board of Supervisors, Hines and Christie, said that they do not believe the report was sworn because Nanos did not sign a copy given to the board on April 21st. The document was written and signed by the sheriff's lawyer. The sheriff signed the report on May 1st, and the lawyer sent it to the board. For both of those supervisors, they say it was too little too late. The supervisors had initially given Nanos 10 business days to comply with their request, and if the sheriff did not comply, they would use a little-used law that would give them a path to remove him from office. Hines said before the meeting, the idea that they were confused about the nature of the homework assignment is absolute bullshit. The media bleeped out the last few words there. I just filled them back in. Quote, I've talked to more than a dozen attorneys and 2 judges who all believe that he should be removed. And while Nanos continues to be embattled over what he has or has not said and whether or not it was perjury, there are more reports coming out about whether or not he has cooperated with the FBI. And that discourse around whether or not Pima County sheriffs cooperated with the FBI, there was reporting that came out on May 12th that Nanos actually scolded another public official for cooperating with a request from the FBI. Emily, you just want to say FBI as much as possible. Maybe.
The FBI!
This is also coming to us from AZ Central, updated on May 12th, 2026. Pima County official says Sheriff Nanos scolded her for giving info to the FBI. A Pima County official said Sheriff Chris Nanos scolded her for providing information to the FBI because it created new leads for his department to pursue in its search for Nancy Guthrie. That's distressing that he's worried about leads, or that the perception is that he's worried about more leads. Pima County Assessor Suzanne Droby said Nanos seemed stressed and frustrated when she told him that her office had complied with requests for information from the FBI. The tone of the call was unusual, Droby said, because she typically had pleasant and cordial interactions with Nanos. Quote, "We're sensitive to the fact that the sheriff is under a lot of stress with all this, but yes, there was a little bit of a negative interaction." The statement goes on to say, quote, "It was inferred that we were creating a lot of additional work for the sheriff's department due to us providing this information to the FBI and then them having the responsibility to follow up on all of those leads that were provided. It felt like there was an insinuation that I had done something wrong by cooperating with the FBI. At that particular moment, I felt like I was put in a position where I felt like I almost should apologize, where I know definitely that was not something that I should be doing." And then they go on to talk about part of the rift or perceived rift between Nanos and the FBI, saying this case has also exposed a rift between Nanos and the FBI. The county has jurisdiction over the investigation, meaning the FBI cannot take over the case unless Nanos gives the Bureau the go-ahead. FBI Director Kash Patel recently went on a podcast to criticize the way Nanos kept the FBI at arm's length during the search for Guthrie, something the sheriff denies. Nanos did not respond to requests for comment. They go on to say that though Nanos assured Droby that he was working, quote, very closely with the FBI, the county assessor's experience seemed to back up Patel's claim that there was friction between the sheriff and the federal bureau. In a telephone interview, Droby said that her office fulfilled a request for information from the FBI to aid in its Guthrie investigation. When she called the sheriff as a courtesy to let him know that she had provided the information, Nanos was, quote, definitely frustrated. Droby said that the type of information she provided should remain private to protect the investigation, and the FBI did not respond to request for comment. The quote from the assessor goes on to say, "It seemed like he was very stressed, very frustrated. I wouldn't categorize it as yelling per se, as much as kind of scolding and expressing frustration with all of the leads he was receiving, their obligation to follow up on them, and that my office was actually being more harm than good by providing more leads that they just had to follow up with." They go on to say Droby said she was unsure about the number of leads her data had created because her office's IT team made up the report and gave it directly to the FBI. Quote, "In his mind, it was a lot of additional work that was being created because we handed this information over," Droby said of Nanos. The sheriff's department had signaled in February that it was overwhelmed by tips, according to public statements issued at the time. They continue saying that the department communications center was receiving hundreds of calls related to the case each day, and the sheriff's department spokesperson said in a February 20th email that she asked that, quote, "only actionable tips be reported to investigators and that comments or opinions on the investigation not be relayed to the 911 or non-emergency lines." And I covered that when it came out at the time. My wondering was if the internet was trying to internet detective and that was overwhelming and potentially swamping helpful leads. They say that the dynamic may have contributed to the tense phone call, which was primarily between Droby and Nanos. The assessor continues as they report, quote, "I didn't appreciate it. I thought I was being extremely helpful. So to have that type of confrontational discussion for doing something that I felt was right was very disappointing." And what's more interesting is how this call ended. Droby said the call ended when another member of the sheriff's department stepped in and told Nanos to back off and leave the county assessor alone. According to Droby, the official said Nanos shouldn't give her a hard time for complying with an FBI request. The sheriff agreed, Droby said, and he thanked her and told her to have a nice day. Droby said that the conversation was an isolated incident. Quote, "Up to that point, I've never had a negative interaction with the sheriff at all. I am kind of chalking it up to a lot of frustration with an immense pressure that he has been put under. being thrust into the national spotlight due to this investigation. However, that being said, it was a very uncomfortable, unpleasant conversation. Drobey said it's rare for her office to receive a request for information from the FBI and that she will always comply with a law enforcement request. Our job is to be transparent and help whenever, it's requested for us for many agencies. In this particular case, obviously being the Pima County Assessor, that was hitting very close to home. I was happy to be able to provide whatever we could provide from the data in our office to help with the investigation. And it notes that this was originally published on May 12th and then updated later in the day on May 12th. But my concerns are, if you are seeing the behavior from the sheriff indicating that this type of stress or pressure or everything going on is causing a lack of judgment, which I think going off on the assessor for providing information to the FBI shows a lack of judgment in that conversation, I have concerns. And we have seen continued spotty conversations, but also I appreciate that it's brought up that he's being thrust into the national spotlight. But I can't forget that this is the sheriff's department that agreed to take part in a reality TV show called Desert Law. It seems that being in the national spotlight was something that Nanos at one time thought was a good thing for him and his department before Nancy Guthrie went missing. So the national spotlight, I don't think, is the excuse here. Also, when you're the elected sheriff, it is your job to provide the steadfast, calm, considered leadership. And if that's getting overridden by stress, frustration, and anger, it causes me pause for what is happening within the department and how decisions are being made. And part of the reason I wanted to cover the background on what was going on with the Board of Supervisors and what was going on with the assessor is because I think it might give context to a group of new statements from the sheriff to different media outlets, including that the sheriff is not in contact with the Guthrie family at all, which I also find concerning. Leonard, a quick thank you to today's sponsor, Honeylove. You've heard me raving about everything Honeylove, but when I say they've rolled out some incredible new bras, that includes their sports bra that is a sports bra, but it's also comfortable enough to just wear it all the time, which is what I do most of the time because I love that level of just coverage and support. But the new Cross Flex Activity Bra is not what you're thinking of when it comes to sports bras. It's actually comfortable support. It's designed for all day wear. It doesn't have anything that is going to pinch. It is so smoothing across the back, and that support all comes without underwire. I absolutely love it. And if you are ready to check out the world of Honeylove, right now they are offering the Crossover Triple Bra Bundle. And who doesn't love that Honeylove is a independent, female-founded brand with products designed by women who actually wear them. If you love Honeylove like I do and you're looking for something new to try in addition to their new sports bra, check out the new Crossover Contour Bra. It's great for under t-shirts, but also if you are dressing up. Leonard, if you are ready to treat yourself to the most advanced bras and shapewear on the market, for a limited time, Honeylove is offering 50% off site-wide. You heard me right. 50% off site-wide during their Memorial Day sale. And you can use our exclusive link to shop at honeylove.com/Leonard. That's honeylove.com/Leonard. And after checkout, they'll ask you how you found them. Let them know it was the Emily Show. Experience the new standard in support and comfort with Honeylove. Let's get back to today's show. This reporting is coming to us from KLOD. Is it cold? Is it cloud? News 13 KOLD from May 11th, 2026. Saying Pima County Sheriff Nanos gives update on Nancy Guthrie investigation. Again, I've been and remain critical of the piecemeal updates on this case instead of just putting out a statement when there is information to put out, because it becomes jumbled and difficult to follow. They begin saying on February 1st, Nancy Guthrie was reported missing from her home in the Catalina foothills. The disappearance of the 84-year-old Guthrie, mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, set off a media firestorm that has been going strong for 100 days now. In the days following her disappearance, they say the roads surrounding her home were packed. 100 days later, and it's silent, with the memorial being the only reminder of what happened. I guess the only physical reminder. But Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos said in an interview with 13 News that their work continues. Quote, "They are working hard to get this resolved, and I think every day they get closer," Nanos said. Based on what? They say the sheriff was not just referring to his detectives working the investigation, but also to the agents at the FBI. Nanos says, day one, the FBI was involved in this case. The FBI! And they continued to be involved in this case every single day. Nanos said they're also receiving help from the Arizona DPS and a handful of labs across the country. Quote, "We continue to work with our labs, whether it's on the digital end or the biological end, DNA." If the quotes sound a little funny, I am reading them exactly as written. It is part of Nanos's cadence that in all of the interviews and all of the things that we have covered, sometimes the sentence structure, I'm like, wait, where did the rest of the sentence go? What is that? It just is at this point. When it comes to DNA, Nanos said the labs are having to separate all of the different DNA that was found inside the Guthrie house and then work to identify who it belongs to. And that takes time. Quote, "It moves at a snail's pace, I guess for some," Nanos said. "But for my investigative team and for me, we look at this as, no, this is doing exactly what we need it to do." Do I know what that means? No, I don't know what that means. Do I know what he means by having to separate all the different DNA that was found in the house? No, because it's an odd way to phrase that. If you're talking about mixed DNA, then why not call it mixed DNA or mixed samples of DNA? But if there is different DNA at the house, there's nothing to be separated. It's just to be tested. So the languaging is hard for me because it's not very specific. It goes on to say, because they want to ensure they're doing it right, not only to avoid arresting the wrong person, but to ensure that they are able to properly prosecute whoever is involved. Quote, "I believe at some point in time, we will make an arrest on this case," Nanos said. Quote, "And whoever that individual is, that individual will have a right to a fair and impartial trial." He said they'll also be able to take the DNA found, use it to figure out information about the individual, and then hopefully connect that to the countless digital pieces of evidence they've collected and cataloged, which sounds to me like IgG or genetic genealogy DNA, which is what they did in the Koberger case. It goes on to say, and that's why Nanos said he absolutely does not see this case as cold. Quote, "There's way too much work to be done. That is ongoing with some of the physical evidence we have," Nanos said, "and we're not going to give up on it because it's been 100 days. They say the 13 News reporter Renee Romo asked Nanos if there was information that they are withholding from the public. And his response was, yes, absolutely there are. But it's not done because we got a keep it secret, he said. That's a direct quote. "It's not done because we've got a keep it secret." I don't know if that was mistyped and it's keep it a secret. I can't tell you. I'm reading it as it's written. "It's done because we got to protect our case." I mean, yeah, a lot of parts of investigations stay secret. The article goes on to say, and while the PCSD and FBI have been receiving tens of thousands of tips, both agencies urge you to call if you saw, heard, or remember anything. "We need you to call us," Nanos said. We know somebody out there knows what happened." And then they give the contact information if you have any information in this case, including 1-800-CALL-FBI. The total reward for information that helps find Nancy Guthrie or those involved in her disappearance is now more than $1.2 million. It does not surprise me that there is information in this investigation that the public does not know. The information that we as the public have gotten has been piecemealed. It has been spotty and inconsistent. And it seems that when large amounts or impactful information has come out, it is because the public's help was needed. So I'm not surprised that there is not more information. I'm again frustrated that the communication method seems to be answering the phone and talking sometimes. And to continue on that, Sheriff Nanos also spoke to people. This is from May 13th. The headline says, "Sheriff recalls moment Nancy Guthrie case took a criminal turn." Quote, "Doesn't look right." The Arizona sheriff leading the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance recounted to people the moments early in the case when he realized the 84-year-old's disappearance was likely criminal in nature. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos spoke to people as a search for Savannah Guthrie's mom, Nancy Guthrie, crossed its 100th day following her disappearance from her residence in Tucson, Arizona. And this is new information that I have not heard yet, but it also seems to conflict with what we've heard Savannah Guthrie say about this case. Because it seemed in Savannah Guthrie's sit-down interview, she was saying that they were imploring the sheriff to understand that their mother was not capable of just walking away, that they thought maybe she had been taken to hospitals, but she wasn't just going to walk out of her house and go missing. And so this, for me, conflicts a bit with that and conflicts with the early reporting in this case. The reporting from people continues saying Nanos recalled being alerted about a missing person case around 2 p.m. over text on February 1st, a few minutes after the chief notified him about an 84-year-old woman missing from her home. Nanos said he got another text that the scene of disappearance, quote, doesn't look right. Something is wrong. We're calling homicide. And that purports to be a direct quote from Nanos relaying a text he received. The quote goes on to say, the reason that homicide was called is because they are the investigative unit in charge of missing person. Search and rescue is their operational team that helps assist with these issues, Nanos says. So you're telling me that on day one, the search and rescue team, the disappearance team, said we need to call in the homicide investigators? And then what happened? The article goes on to say that Nancy's disappearance led to a massive multi-agency search and has so far generated several leads, such as doorbell camera footage showing an armed suspect and a glove found near Nancy's home. That glove is not a lead. I understand why they're including it. The gloves found so far away were not a lead. And then gloves, we know that the testing on the gloves that were closer to Nancy's home were actually traced back to a restaurant worker whose gloves they were. So nope. I mean, I guess they were leads until they weren't. And they report that Nanos says the investigation continues and they are increasingly getting closer to answers. Again, I hate to be so critical, but how do you know you're getting closer to answers? You might be getting closer to answers that are also a no, but I guess those are answers too. Those answers just might not lead to the type of answers that this seems to insinuate. Quote, every day our DNA labs are working with our investigators and they're coming up with different ideas and different thoughts of how to help them make this DNA work for us. You just test it. And then you see if you can establish a profile. And then you decide if you need to do IgG and start doing some genetic profiling. But I don't know what he means by they're just coming up with all these ideas on how to make DNA work for us. The quote from Nanos goes on to say, how can we do more with what we have? And so that's why I say I think we're getting closer. I think that's platitudes. Because what we see with a lot of investigations is sometimes you're just trying to get the information you have. You don't know if you're closer until all the dots connect. And that's not all of the information from people and their conversation with Sheriff Nanos. On May 14th, they reported this. Sheriff leading Nancy Guthrie investigation says focus is on digital evidence as they shift through thousands and thousands of videos. So we've now moved from the DNA to the digital evidence. I think digital evidence is a good place to focus because the DNA takes as long as it takes to extract, build a profile. And then if they're doing IgG, that might not hit for years to come. Authorities investigating the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie in Arizona are turning to a growing web of digital clues in the case. This includes, quote, thousands and thousands of videos, according to Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, who tells people that investigators are focusing on analyzing digital evidence, DNA, and tips in hope of identifying a suspect. Right now, I think our focus is on the tips, the leads, and the evidence we have in front of us. Digitally, the camera footages, as well as biological, the DNA, and those types of things. They say more than 100 days after Guthrie vanished, authorities have not publicly identified a suspect or announced an arrest, but Nanos says investigators remain convinced that the case can still be solved. Quote, my team, I've said all along, they're going to solve this, he says. I fully 100% believe that. At the center of the investigation is now an enormous catalog of surveillance footage gathered from intersections, neighborhoods, businesses, and home security systems across the area. They quote Nanos as saying, there's thousands and thousands of video out there from intersections and ring cameras that we have to catalog. Maybe it's all of the white trucks over here, all of the red sedans over here. You've got to have it so when you do find a suspect, quote, hey, the suspect is John Doe. We got him. Now we go and say, well, What else do we know about John Doe? I don't have a tremendous amount of confidence in this statement, unfortunately, because it doesn't seem like he's really telling us how they're breaking down this investigation, because I would think they would target vehicles within a window of time where they might have been coming from the Guthrie home first and then seeing if there's any recurrences of those videos in subsequent footage. But you would need to target vehicles leaving the area of Guthrie's home during the window of time where you know she was taken, and then work from there versus sorting them by color. But maybe there's things left out of this statement. Emily, keep reading. The process, he says, is methodical. Build the digital map first, then work backwards once investigators have someone in which to compare. Quote, oh, he drives a white truck. Were there any white trucks in the area at that time? Nanos continues, oh, John Doe has this cell phone number. You back up those pieces of evidence that you gathered early on to try to make your case. Yeah, but also it seems like you could narrow down the cell phone pings around that time and then expand out to see if there are any connections to those cell phone pings. I mean, that takes a ton of time. We saw that in the Adelson case, but you can take the tower dumps and then see if any of those numbers are in that area either all the time and then possibly exclude them, or if there are numbers connected to Nancy Guthrie or family, which is what happened in the Adelson case, and start to sort that way. And maybe they are. And it would also seem that narrowing down vehicles in the area, because I imagine at this point they know all the neighbors' vehicles, and then you can categorize those kind of out and then look at other vehicles leaving the area in the targeted time and then work from there on those vehicles. And then at least you might have some vehicles of interest that were leaving the area, because the DNA analysis is just going to take time, especially if they're moving to IgG. The article goes on to say, at the same time, investigators continue to wait on advances in DNA analysis that could prove critical to the case. Quote, I know we have DNA that is unknown who the contributor or depositor is, but I think they're getting closer to finding out who that was, Nanos tells People, adding that he has confidence in our labs. Nanos goes on to say, when the labs tell us, hey, there's nothing else we can do, well, then maybe we've got a problem. We've got a cold case. But right now, the labs aren't telling us that. According to the sheriff, multiple laboratories across the country, including federal and state partners, are collaborating behind the scenes as technology continues to evolve. He's quoted as saying, when you have the best minds in the country working on problems, I think they're going to solve them. It just takes a while. Nanos says that investigators are moving carefully, even amid mounting public pressure for answers. Quote, nobody wants to make a false arrest. Nobody wants to falsely accuse somebody, he emphasizes. At some point in time, someday, we may have somebody in a courtroom that deserves his or her right to a fair trial. The way you get that is through a fair and impartial investigation. I agree with that part. You do need a fair and impartial investigation. I also think that if the update is that there are no updates, that's okay too. I understand that that becomes hard and unsatisfactory, but sometimes that might need to be what it is. Nanos says detectives are focused on evidence, not deadlines. Quote, there's frustration because people want to know. But this is just like any other case. Sometimes you solve them within hours or days. Sometimes it takes a long time, which is one of the things he has been consistent on. And he's consistently said that since the beginning of the case. Sometimes these cases take years, he said early on in the case. And that's interjection from me. Nanos goes on to talk a bit about the reports of tension between his department and the FBI. He says coordination between his office and the FBI began soon after learning of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Quote, Director Patel has his rights to his opinions, he says, adding that he believed some remarks were factually inaccurate. Quote, the FBI was working with us day one, Nanos said. We always had a working relationship. He disputes claims that investigators mishandled the scene or delayed search efforts in the critical early hours after Guthrie vanished. Quote, the plane was started immediately, Nanos says, referring to aerial search operations. Quote, they found blood, search and rescue, looked at the scene and realized it seemed suspicious. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. For Nanos, much of the public criticism overlooks the realities of how complex criminal investigations unfold, especially when detectives are intentionally withholding information to protect the integrity of the case. The sheriff doesn't do the investigation. His team does, he says. There are several people dedicated to this team. They are the talent. Criticizing those who are actually out there touching it, smelling it, handling it, doing the work, that's just absolutely shameful. Those young men and women are working hard every day. That's a direct quote from Sheriff Nanos. The article goes on to say that as the family continues to wait for answers, Nanos says he understands the frustration surrounding the case. While he is no longer directly communicating with the Guthrie family and says those conversations are being handled by the FBI, he maintains that investigators remain focused on solving it. And that indicates a bigger problem to me. Let's see what the rest of the article says, and we'll talk about that for a moment. They're quoting Nanos as saying, quote, "The public is frustrated, even the Guthrie family," he says. "Every passing second must feel like 100 days because they don't know. What matters is moving forward carefully so we don't make mistakes or falsely accuse someone or make a bad arrest." Nanos says that we still get calls, we still get tips, even if the tip is from last night, 102 days later, because it might be somebody calling saying somebody in the neighborhood doesn't look right. We'll tell our folks here in Pima County, if you see something suspicious to you, call us. The indication that communications with the Guthrie family are not happening by the agency leading the investigation does cause me a bit of concern. What has happened that the communications with the Guthrie family are not helpful, fortuitous, or have been cut off entirely, and they have rather worked with the FBI, who is not leading the investigation? It makes me concerned about what else is going on behind the scenes or under the surface of this investigation. And when we see the questions from the Board of Supervisors, questions from other government officials saying that Nanos was scolding them for assisting the FBI, and then some inconsistent statements about even the earliest days of this investigation, it causes me pause. And I worry that that upset within a department is also going to be a distraction from working a case that is getting deep into the weeds, and has to be, because if we weren't deep into the weeds, then we would have had some more answers. And unfortunately, I think that the DNA is probably going to be their best bet at this point, but you never know when there's going to be a change in a case. You never know when they will get that one piece of information that will make everything else click into place. And I hope that we do. I hope that the Guthrie family gets answers. I know that there are so many families of those missing that don't get those answers. And it is horrific for families waiting for those answers that might never come. It's frustrating to see how scattered it has played out. My criticism of the inconsistent communication stands. Even if the communication was the investigation is ongoing, period, fine. But a lot of the statements from the sheriff are, I think this, maybe this. It's not definitive. And it doesn't help anyone determine what's going on in this investigation or feel more confident. We're like, maybe we're sorting the red trucks from the white cars. If there's no comment, if there's no update, if the update is DNA processing remains ongoing, we are still following leads, fine. It does not feel thoughtful and considered. These feel like more off-the-cuff conversations. And with an ongoing investigation, that just becomes a little bit harder for everyone and to help the public feel confident in how the investigation is going. So I will keep you up to date. What updates do we take away from all of that? Well, a large update that Sheriff Nanos, and it seems Pima County Sheriff, is not in any communication with Nancy Guthrie's family. And that is very, very unusual. That the sheriff continues to fire back at the FBI director saying that they weren't brought in on this case in the earliest days, and him saying that they were. Then again, he's also been forwarded to the AG's office for perjury investigation. So I don't even know what to make of that until we see more about it. But it seems that there are at least enough questions with regard to whether the sheriff was untruthful in his hiring and in his representation of his past work that it gives me a significant amount of pause. And I'm sure that the Pima County Board of Supervisors have that same pause, and that's why they've been pursuing routes to see what can be done here. I hope that it is not distracting within the department, but I don't know how it could be any other way when your work is in the crosshairs. And what else did we learn from that? Well, we learned that initial investigators said we probably need the homicide team in here to start helping with this investigation. This is going to go beyond a missing person. which is an interesting new note. And we know that there is DNA and digital forensics still ongoing across multiple labs. So where will this lead us in another 100 days? Unfortunately, I don't know. But I think the way that information is coming out is just maybe leading to more speculation and not as much help. So maybe in the future, we will see DNA is still being processed and some more grounded statements. We are still compiling digital evidence. We are still going through thousands of hours of video, but I am going to keep seeing where this goes because at this point, I'm invested. I want to know what's happening with the investigations into the sheriff. And now I have so many questions that I have unanswered that it's created an open loop for me too. And for a lot of you as well. So we will keep an eye on when we have updates of substance, and the substance in these, again, being that, yes, they called in homicide investigators. It sounds like early on in this investigation, and that the victim's family is not talking to the Pima County sheriffs. Those are significant updates and give us a peek that there is still disruption within this investigation. Remember, it wasn't till the end of the Koberger case that we heard that detectives were in touch with the victims' families daily, even if the updates were small, even if it was just to check in and say that things were still progressing, but that they were in touch with the victims' families daily. And that's not what's happening here. And it causes me some concern. But you know what doesn't cause me grave concerns? Being here with the Law Nerds. It's always good to see you. And thank you again for all of your love on our latest Law Nerd Shop I'm With the Band launch. There are just a few things left from that launch while I'm recording this. And if you don't want to miss out in the future, make sure that you have the Law Nerd app so that I can keep you in the loop before things go live. Because, well, we do our best to plan, but the Law Nerds have had such resounding support for the Law Nerd Shop that, well, things do sell out. It is always our goal that you're able to find the things that you love whenever we have a launch. And sometimes those things are just gone a little bit faster than we anticipate. There are still some things left in the Law Nerd Shop. Don't forget to check it out. There are some surprises in this launch that were a lot of fun to bring to light for you. And we will keep you posted in the future. We've heard your requests for some of your favorites to be restocked. So we will keep you posted in the future if that's something we are able to do. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a Law Nerd. And as we get into this week, my kiddo is graduating high school. And so I will have some scheduling changes and I will keep you updated to those. I'm not going to have a new podcast next week. I will be with my kiddo as he gets ready to move out for the 2026 DCI marching season with the Cavaliers. I'm so incredibly proud of him. If you caught any DCI last season or are interested in marching band this season, don't worry. I'll be talking more about it, and maybe I'll see you at Lucas Oil in August for finals. But as we get into the summer, there is going to be Band Mom mode in addition to Law Nerd mode because it is going to be busy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a Law Nerd. Thank you for all your support of Emo Emily as we go through my first kiddo graduating from high school. It's so much, y'all. It's so much. Everybody says how much it is. Accurate. Everyone, accurate. It's accurate. And I'm so excited. I'm so happy for him. And I'm so absolutely overwhelmed with how grateful I am that so many of you also got to celebrate all of these milestones with us as T has popped onto stream and said hello since junior high. And for some, since elementary school in early days. And it's been awesome to have those moments shared and also memorialized because as they get older and things change, it just feels like time speeds up way too much. So for all of you in the graduation feels with me, for all of those who relate, and for those of you who have it coming up, don't worry, just take a deep breath. It's wonderful. It's a lot and it's wonderful. And it's wonderful being here with you. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for being a Law Nerd. I'm going to take deep breaths this week. We're not going to be streaming as much because I'm going to be doing all the graduation things, but I will see you on stream early in the week And then I will be sharing some of our graduationness with you in the Law Nerd app. I have some other things to share with you this week too, and I can't wait. So Law Nerds, I will see you soon. Cheers. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Law Nerd app at lawnerdapp.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.